In the quiet fields of Cedar County, Elias Rowe stands alone with his vast wealth and empty heart, until a chance encounter with Lena, a baker's assistant, begins to fill the void in his life. Their budding romance faces obstacles from past betrayals and present deceptions, testing whether love can bloom in soil tainted by mistrust. Join us on this journey of redemption and second chances in the golden wheat fields where healing begins. But before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The morning sun spread across the vast wheat fields of Cedar County. Elias Rowe stood on his porch, coffee in hand, surveying the land that stretched as far as the eye could. See? At 33, he owned more acres than anyone else in the county. His two-story farmhouse, painted white with green shutters, sat in the middle of his property like a lonely island in a sea of crops. Another day, he muttered to himself, setting his empty cup on the porch railing. Tom, his farm manager, approached with a clipboard in hand. "Morning, Mr. Rowe. We've got the south field ready for harvest next week." Elias nodded. "Good, make sure the equipment is checked twice." "Already done, sir," Tom replied, used to his boss's perfectionism. "Also, the bank called. They want to discuss expanding your loan for the new irrigation system." "Tell them I'll call back," Elias said, his voice flat. After Tom left, Elias walked toward his barn, hands in his pockets. People in town called him the Golden Farmer, young, handsome, and richer than most would ever be. What they didn't see was the emptiness that followed him like a shadow. 5 years ago, his parents had died in a car accident, leaving him the farm and the responsibility that came with it. A year later, his business partner and best friend Marcus had stolen money from their joint venture and disappeared. Since then, Elias had withdrawn into himself, focusing only on expanding the farm and building his wealth. That evening, as the sun set over his fields, Elias walked through the rows of wheat as he did most nights. The golden stalks swayed in the breeze, whispering secrets he couldn't understand. This routine had become his only comfort, these quiet moments when he could breathe without the weight of expectations. "Is this all there is?" he asked the darkening sky. The next morning, Elias decided to go to the town market. He usually sent his housekeeper for supplies, but today he felt restless, confined by the walls of his empty house. The Cedar County Farmers Market was busy with Saturday shoppers. People nodded respectfully as he passed, but no one approached him for conversation. He was used to it, the distance his wealth and reputation created. He stopped at Mrs. Wilson's vegetable stand, picking up some tomatoes. "Nice crop this year," he commented. "Thank you, Mr. Rowe," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The weather's been good to us all." As he moved on, the scent of fresh bread caught his attention. Following the aroma, he found himself at the baker's corner stand. Behind the counter, arranging loaves on shelves, was a young woman he'd never noticed before. She wore a simple blue dress with an apron dusted with flour. Her brown hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she hummed softly as she worked. When she turned, he saw a smudge of flour on her cheek that she seemed unaware of. "Can I help you?" she asked with a genuine smile that caught him off guard. Yes," he stumbled. "A loaf of bread." "Any preference?" "The sourdough just came out of the oven," she suggested, her voice warm and unpretentious. "That sounds good," he replied, studying her face. There was something refreshing about her lack of recognition. Most people in town knew exactly who he was and what he owned. As she wrapped the bread in paper, he noticed her writing something on the package. "What's that?" he asked. "Oh," she looked up, slightly embarrassed. "Just a little note. I write them for the regulars. It's silly, I guess." "No, it's nice," he said, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. She tied the package with string and handed it to him. "That'll be $4. As he paid, their fingers touched briefly, and he felt an unexpected jolt. "I'm Elias," he said, realizing too late how awkward he sounded. "Lena," she replied. "Lena Hart. I'm Mr. Baker's assistant." "You're new in town?" he asked, trying to extend the moment. 6 months now," she explained. "I moved here from Riverdale. After my aunt passed, Mr. Baker was kind enough to give me a job and the apartment above the bakery." Behind him, someone cleared their throat. He was holding up the line. Well, thank you, Lena, he said, reluctantly stepping away. For the bread. Enjoy it, Elias, she replied, already turning to the next customer. All the way home, he kept thinking about her smile, how it was directed at him, not at his bank account or his land. For the first time in years, someone had seen just him. The following week, Elias found reasons to visit the market again, and the week after that. Each time he bought a loaf of sourdough bread from Lena, exchanging a few more words with each visit. He learned that she was 26, that she loved to read, and that she'd been on her own since her mother died when she was 16. She had a habit of kneeling down to talk to children at eye level and often slipped extra cookies to elderly customers who lived alone. One day he arrived at the market to find Lena helping an old man with his packages. She noticed Elias waiting and held up a finger to indicate she'd be just a minute. He watched as she carefully arranged the items in the man's cart, patted his hand, and sent him off with a smile. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said, brushing flour from her hands as she returned to the counter. Mr. Peterson has trouble with his grip since his stroke. You're very kind to everyone, Elias observed. Lena shrugged. It's nothing special, just how people should treat each other. She reached for a sourdough loaf. The usual? Actually, he said, gathering his courage, I was wondering if you might like to have dinner sometime. At my farm. He saw surprise register on her face, followed by hesitation. For a moment he regretted asking, sure she would refuse. I don't usually, she began. It's just dinner, he said quickly. I thought we could talk without a line of people behind me. She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, I'd like that. Relief and something that felt strangely like happiness flooded through him. Great, when are you free? I don't work on Mondays, she offered. Monday it is, he agreed. I could pick you up at 6. I'll be ready, she said with a small smile. That evening, Elias walked his fields with a lighter step. For the first time in years, he had something to look forward to besides watching his crops grow and his bank account increase. Monday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze. Elias spent the morning distracted, checking his watch every hour. He'd asked his housekeeper, Martha, to prepare a special dinner, and he'd cleaned up the sitting room that had been neglected for too long. You expecting company, Mr. Rowe? Martha asked, eyebrows raised as she saw him placing fresh flowers on the dining table. Just a friend, he replied, not meeting her eyes. Martha, who had worked for the Rowe family for 20 years, smiled knowingly, but said nothing more. At 5:45, Elias drove his pickup truck into town. He'd considered taking his expensive car but decided against it. Something told him Lena would be more comfortable with simplicity. The bakery was closed when he arrived, but lights shone from the apartment above. He knocked on the side door, feeling unusually nervous. When Lena opened the door, he almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple green dress that made her eyes look like spring leaves. You look beautiful, he said honestly. A blush crept across her cheeks. Thank you, just let me get my sweater. As they drove back to the farm, Elias pointed out landmarks and told her about the history of the area. Lena listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest. It's so peaceful out here, she commented as they approached his property. Then her eyes widened as the full size of his farm came into view. Oh, this is all yours? Elias nodded, suddenly self-conscious. My family's been building it for generations. It's beautiful, she said softly, all this open space and sky. When they reached the house, Martha had everything ready. The table was set, candles were lit, and the aroma of roast chicken filled the air. You didn't need to go to all this trouble, Lena said, looking uncomfortable for the first time. It's no trouble, he assured her. I just wanted you to feel welcome. Throughout dinner, Elias found himself talking more than he had in years. He told her about his parents, about growing up on the farm, about his dreams of making the land more than just a business. Lena listened, asking thoughtful questions that showed she was truly hearing him. What about you? He asked as they finished dessert. What are your dreams? Lena looked down at her plate. I've never had the luxury of big dreams. After Mom died, it was just about surviving. She looked up with a small smile. but I've always wanted a little garden, a place to grow things and watch them thrive. Later, as the night grew dark, Elias walked Lena outside to show her the stars. Away from town lights, the sky was a brilliant canopy of twinkling points. "I've never seen so many stars," she breathed, her head tilted back. Elias watched her face illuminated by moonlight and felt something shift inside him. A wall that had stood firm for years began to crumble. "Would you like to see the orchard?" he asked impulsively. "It's beautiful at night." They walked side by side through rows of apple trees, their branches creating patterns against the starlit sky. Neither spoke, but the silence between them felt comfortable, natural. When he drove her home later that night, Elias found himself reluctant to say goodbye. "Thank you for dinner," Lena said as they pulled up to the bakery. "I had a wonderful time. Could we do it again?" he asked, trying to keep the eagerness from his voice. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I'd like that, Elias." As he drove home through the dark countryside, Elias realized he was smiling too. For the first time in years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. But back in town, eyes had noticed, tongues had begun to wag, and the quiet bubble they'd created was already in danger of bursting. In the shadows across from the bakery, a car was parked. Inside sat a woman watching Elias's departure with narrowed eyes. She picked up her phone and dialed. "It's me," she said when the call connected. "You were right. He's seeing someone, some nobody from the bakery." She paused, listening. "No, I don't think it's serious yet, but we need to move quickly." She hung up, her lips pressed into a thin line. Elias Rowe had no idea what was coming. In the weeks that followed, Elias and Lena settled into a gentle rhythm. Every Monday, he would pick her up for dinner at his farm. Sometimes they would walk through his fields afterward. Sometimes they would sit on his porch watching fireflies dance in the darkness. Martha, Elias's housekeeper, noticed the change in him immediately. The quiet, brooding man who barely spoke was now humming in the mornings. He had even asked her to teach him how to make coffee the way Lena liked it, strong, with just a touch of cream. "You seem different," Martha commented one morning as Elias helped her carry groceries into the kitchen. "Do I?" he asked, though the hint of a smile gave him away. "It's nice to see you happy again," Martha said, patting his arm. "Your parents would have liked to see it too." On a bright Wednesday morning, Elias surprised Lena by showing up at the bakery just as she was opening. "I thought you might want to see the sunrise from the East Hill," he said, holding out a thermos. "I brought coffee." Lena glanced at the clock. "I don't start for another hour," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Let me just leave Mr. Baker a note." They drove in comfortable silence to a hill on the eastern edge of Elias's property. As they sat on a blanket he had brought, the first rays of sun broke over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I used to come here with my mother," Elias said softly. "She said it was the best view in the county." "She was right," Lena replied, her face glowing in the morning light. "Thank you for sharing it with me." As they sipped their coffee, Elias found himself telling Lena about his mother's garden, how she had planted roses and lavender, how she had taught him to recognize different birds by their songs. "I've let it go since she died," he admitted. "I couldn't bring myself to tend it." "Would you show it to me sometime?" Lena asked gently. "I'd like that," he replied, surprised by how much he meant it. Later that week, Elias took Lena to see the overgrown garden behind the house. Weeds had choked out most of the flowers, but a few stubborn roses still bloomed among the tangle. "It's still beautiful," Lena said, kneeling to touch a pink bloom. "The bones of it are strong." "Like you," Elias said without thinking. Lena looked up at him, surprise in her eyes. Then she smiled, a soft, shy smile that made his heart skip. "I've had to be." In that moment, with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees and Lena kneeling among his mother's roses, Elias felt a certainty settle over him. This her was what had been missing from his life. But as their relationship blossomed in private, whispers began to spread through Cedar County. At the diner, at the post office, at church on Sundays, people talked. She must be after his money. Poor Elias. Doesn't he realize she's just using him? A baker's assistant and the richest man in the county? It'll never last. One Monday morning, as Lena arranged fresh loaves in the display case, she overheard two women talking near the coffee counter. "I hear she spends every Monday at his place," one said in a stage whisper. "Well, you can't blame her for trying to move up in the world," the other replied with a laugh. "She's got nothing, and he's got everything." Lena's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down and continued working. When the women approached the counter, she served them with her usual smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "That'll be $8.50, she said evenly. "My, those are getting expensive," one woman commented, eyeing Lena's simple dress. "But I suppose some people have found ways to afford the finer things in life." After they left, Lena went into the back room and leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to steady herself. Mr. Baker found her there a few minutes later. "Don't let them get to you, girl," he said kindly. "People always talk when they've got nothing better to do." "It's not true," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not with him for his money." "Of course you're not," Mr. Baker replied. "Anyone with eyes can see that. And Elias Rowe may be rich, but he's not stupid. He knows a good heart when he sees one." Meanwhile, Elias was facing his own challenges. His farm manager, Tom, had mentioned offhandedly that people are talking about his relationship with the Baker girl. "Since when do I care what people think?" Elias had responded sharply. "You don't," Tom agreed, "but she might." The words stuck with Elias, nagging at him throughout the day. Would Lena be hurt by the gossip? Would it drive her away? The thought of losing her made his chest tighten with anxiety. That evening, as they sat on his porch swing watching the sunset, he noticed Lena was quieter than usual. "Is everything okay?" he asked, taking her hand in his. She hesitated, then sighed. "People are talking, Elias, about us." "Let them talk," he said, squeezing her hand. "They're saying I'm only with you for your money," she continued, her voice small. "That I'm trying to move up in the world." Anger flashed through him. "Who said that? Tell me their names." "It doesn't matter," Lena said, pulling her hand away. "What matters is, maybe this isn't a good idea. Us, I mean." Elias felt as if the ground had dropped out from under him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your life is complicated," she explained, not meeting his eyes. "You have this huge farm, all these responsibilities. People expect things from you, and I'm just me, a girl who works in a bakery. That's exactly why he began, then stopped himself. It was too soon for those words, wasn't it? "That's exactly why I want you in my life, Lena, because you see me, not my bank account or my land." She looked at him then, her eyes searching his face. "Are you sure about that? Because your life would be a lot simpler without me in it." "Simpler, yes," he agreed, "and empty, like it was before I met you." The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach her. Her expression softened, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm not used to being noticed," she admitted. "To being the center of attention, it's uncomfortable." "I know," he said, wrapping his arm around her, "but we'll face it together, if you'll stay." As summer deepened, Elias and Lena grew closer. He showed her every corner of his farm, the old barn where he had played as a child, the apple orchard his grandfather had planted, the small pond where frogs sang in the evenings. She began to help in his mother's garden, slowly bringing it back to life. Under her careful hands, the roses flourished again, and new flowers appeared among the old ones. Sometimes she would bring freshly baked bread, and they would have simple picnics in the shade of the garden trees. For Elias, these were the happiest months he could remember since his parents died. The weight of loneliness that had pressed on him for years began to lift. He found himself sharing dreams he had never spoken aloud, of turning part of his land into a nature preserve, of starting a program to teach children about farming. "You should do it," Lena encouraged him. "You have the means and it would make you happy." "What about you?" he asked. "What would make you happy?" She thought for a moment. "This," she said simply, "being here with you, having someone to care about, who cares about me too." Despite the occasional sting of gossip, they built their relationship one day at a time. Elias began to join Lena at church on Sundays, sitting beside her in the pew. He would wait for her after her shifts at the bakery, and they would walk together through the town square, ignoring the curious glances. One evening in late August, as they sat by the pond watching the sunset reflect on the water, Elias realized he couldn't imagine his life without Lena in it. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. After his parents' death and Marcus's betrayal, he had built walls around his heart, convinced that caring too much only led to pain. But Lena had slipped through those defenses without even trying, simply by being herself, kind, honest, and unimpressed by his wealth. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "The future," he answered truthfully. "And what do you see?" she asked, her voice light, but her eyes serious. "You," he said simply. "I see you." The smile that spread across her face was like sunrise after a long night. She leaned in and kissed him, softly at first, then with a warmth that made his heart race. "I see you too," she whispered against his lips. As September approached, Elias began to plan. He wanted to ask Lena to stay, not just for now, but for good. He consulted with Martha about the perfect dinner, chose a date when the harvest moon would be full, and even drove to the city to visit a jewelry store. The small velvet box burned a hole in his pocket as he returned home, both excited and nervous about the step he was about to take. He had never imagined himself married, settled. But with Lena it felt right. It felt like coming home after a long journey. The night before his planned proposal, Elias received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was one he hadn't heard in years. "Elias," the woman said, "it's been a long time." He sat heavily in his desk chair, the blood draining from his face. "Rebecca," he said, his voice tight. "What do you want?" Rebecca Williams had been his girlfriend before. His parents died. She had left town shortly after their funeral, unable to handle Elias's grief and unwilling to wait for him to heal. "I'm back in Cedar County," she said smoothly. "Just for a while. I thought we might catch up." "There's nothing to catch up on," he replied coldly. "Oh, I think there is," she countered. "I've heard you've been seeing someone. You're Baker's assistant, is it?" How quaint. The condescension in her voice made his jaw clench. "My relationship is none of your business, Rebecca." "Maybe not," she agreed too easily. "But there are some things you should know before you get too serious with this girl. Things about your friend Marcus that you never knew." Elias froze. "What are you talking about?" "Meet me tomorrow," she said. "The old cafe on Main Street, noon. I'll tell you everything." After she hung up, Elias sat in the dark, his mind racing. What could Rebecca possibly know about Marcus? The man had stolen money from their joint venture and disappeared 5 years ago. Elias had accepted the betrayal and moved on. Why bring it up now? The next morning he was distracted and tense as he worked with Tom in the fields. The velvet box weighed heavily in his pocket, a reminder of his plans for the evening. Whatever Rebecca wanted to tell him, he decided it wouldn't change anything. His past was his past. Lena was his future. At 11:30, he drove into town, determined to hear Rebecca out and then put her firmly behind him. As he parked near the cafe, he noticed Lena through the window of the bakery across the street. She was helping an elderly woman with her packages, smiling that genuine smile that had first caught his attention. Love for her washed over him, so strong it almost took his breath away. Yes, tonight he would ask her to stay, to be his wife, to build a life together on the land he loved. He was so lost in these thoughts that he didn't notice the sleek black car that pulled up beside his truck. The door opened, and Rebecca stepped out, as elegant and polished as he remembered, but with a hardness in her eyes that was new. "Elias," she said, extending her hand. "You look well." "Let's get this over with," he replied, ignoring her hand. They entered the cafe, heads turned. Rebecca was a striking woman, and her expensive clothes and confident manner drew attention. They found a table in the corner, away from curious ears. "So," Elias said after they had ordered coffee, "what's this about Marcus?" Rebecca smiled, a calculated curve of her lips. "Always straight to the point. That's what I used to like about you." "Rebecca," he warned. "Fine," she said, leaning forward. "What if I told you Marcus wasn't the only one involved in that little scheme?" What if there was someone else, someone closer to you? Elias felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying, Rebecca continued, lowering her voice, that your precious Baker girl isn't who you think she is. She has connections to Marcus that you don't know about. That's impossible, Elias said immediately. Lena moved here 6 months ago. Marcus has been gone for 5 years. Are you sure about that? Rebecca asked, raising an eyebrow. Have you checked her background? Do you even know who she really is? Doubt, unwelcome and insidious, crept into Elias's mind. This is ridiculous, he said, standing up. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Rebecca hissed. People are watching. Reluctantly, he sat. Say what you came to say, then leave me alone. Your girlfriend's real name is Magdalena Hart, Rebecca said, sliding a folder across the table. She's Marcus's cousin. They grew up together, and she knew exactly who you were when she took that job at the bakery. Elias stared at the folder, but didn't touch it. You're lying. Open it, Rebecca urged. See for yourself. With a sense of dread, Elias flipped open the folder. Inside were photographs, old ones showing a younger Lena with a man who was unmistakably Marcus. They were at what looked like a family gathering, arms around each other, smiling at the camera. This proves nothing, Elias said, though uncertainty gnawed at him. So they knew each other. That doesn't mean she's involved in anything. Then why didn't she tell you? Rebecca pressed. Why keep it a secret? Think about it, Elias. She shows up in your town, gets close to you, wins your trust. Don't you find the timing suspicious? Elias closed the folder, pushing it back towards her. I don't know what game you're playing, Rebecca, but I'm not interested. No game, she replied, sipping her coffee calmly. Just looking out for an old friend. Marcus took a lot of money from you, Elias. What if he sent his cousin to get more? The suggestion was so outrageous that Elias almost laughed. You don't know Lena at all if you think she's capable of that. Maybe not, Rebecca conceded. But can you take that chance, with your heart, with your family's legacy? Before Elias could respond, the bell above the cafe door jingled. He looked up to see Lena entering, a paper bag in her hands. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on him. The smile that started to form on her face froze when she saw Rebecca. Time seemed to stand still as their eyes met across the room. Elias saw confusion in Lena's expression, then hurt as she took in the scene, him sitting with a beautiful, well-dressed woman, a folder between them. Lena, he called, starting to rise, but it was too late. She had already turned and hurried out the door. Well, Rebecca commented, that was unfortunate timing. Elias glared at her. This conversation is over, he said flatly, throwing money on the table for the coffee. He rushed out of the cafe, looking up and down the street for Lena. He spotted her half a block away, walking quickly back toward the bakery. Lena, wait, he called, jogging after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. When he reached her, he could see tears in her eyes. It's not what you think, he said quickly. That was Rebecca, an old girlfriend. She wanted to talk about something from the past. It meant nothing. For you don't owe me an explanation, Lena said, her voice steady despite the tears. We never promised each other anything. That's not true, Elias argued. What we have, it means everything to me, Lena. She looked at him then, searching his face. Does it? Because it looked like you were having a pretty intense conversation with your ex-girlfriend. She came to me with some crazy story, Elias explained, running a hand through his hair in frustration. About you and Marcus, my old business partner. She's trying to cause trouble, that's all. At the mention of Marcus's name, something flickered in Lena's eyes. It was brief, but Elias caught it, a flash of recognition quickly hidden. Doubt planted by Rebecca's insinuations took root. You know that name, he said slowly. You know Marcus. Lena swallowed hard. Elias, I can explain. Those 4 words hit him like a physical blow. So it was true. Rebecca hadn't been lying, at least not about Lena knowing Marcus. You've been lying to me, he said, his voice hollow. All this time? No, Lena insisted. I never lied. I didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. Elias exclaimed, louder than he intended. People on the street turned to look at them. Lowering his voice, he asked, "What else haven't you told me, Lena? Or is that even your real name?" "Of course it's my real name," she said, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Elias, please let me explain. Not here, not like this." His hand moved to his pocket, feeling the small velvet box there. The hope and certainty he had felt just hours ago seemed to crumble like dust. "I need time to think," he said finally. "This is a lot." "Elias," Lena pleaded, reaching for his hand, but he stepped back, the pain of potential betrayal too fresh. "I'll call you," he said, not meeting her eyes. As he walked back to his truck, every step felt heavy. Behind him, Lena stood motionless in the middle of the sidewalk, the paper bag she had been carrying now forgotten at her feet. That evening, instead of the romantic dinner he had planned, Elias walked alone through his fields as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The wheat swayed in the strengthening wind, whispering secrets he still couldn't understand. Could Lena really have been using him all this time? The thought was almost too painful to consider. And yet, the evidence was there. She knew Marcus, had kept it from him, had lied by omission if nothing else. As thunder rumbled in the distance, Elias made a decision. Tomorrow he would go to the bakery. He would hear Lena out. And then, based on what she told him, he would decide whether what they had built together was real or just another betrayal. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Lena was writing a note. With tears streaming down her face, she carefully penned the words, "I don't want to be a chapter in your story. I want to be someone who fits in your silence, your soil, your heart, but I don't know if I'm allowed to." By the time the first raindrops began to fall, she had made her decision too. The storm that had threatened all evening finally broke just after midnight. Rain pounded against the windows of Elias's farmhouse as he sat in his father's old chair, staring at the photographs Rebecca had given him. After leaving the cafe, he had returned and taken the folder, needing to see the evidence for himself. There was no denying it. The man in the photos was definitely Marcus. And the woman was unmistakably Lena, though younger, her hair longer, her smile carefree in a way he rarely saw now. Thunder crashed outside, matching the turmoil in his heart. Had everything between them been a lie? An elaborate scheme to get close to him? The Lena he knew, gentle, honest, kind to everyone, seemed incapable of such deception. And yet she had kept this connection hidden. Why? Sleep eluded him that night. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the farm washed clean in the early morning light. Elias showered, changed, and headed to town with determined steps. He needed answers. The bakery was just opening when he arrived. Through the window, he could see Mr. Baker arranging pastries in the display case, but there was no sign of Lena. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. Mr. Baker looked up, his usual friendly smile fading as he saw Elias's expression. "Morning, Mr. Rowe," he said cautiously. "Is Lena here?" Elias asked, cutting straight to the point. Mr. Baker hesitated. "No, she's not." "When will she be in?" "She won't be," Mr. Baker replied, his voice softening. "She left last night, said she needed to take care of something important." Elias felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "Left? What do you mean left? Where did she go?" "She didn't say exactly," Mr. Baker said, looking uncomfortable. "Just packed her things and said she was sorry to leave on such short notice. She did leave this for you, though." He reached under the counter and pulled out an envelope with Elias's name written on it in Lena's neat handwriting. Elias took it, his hands not quite steady. "Thank you," he managed to say before turning to leave. Outside, he sat in his truck, staring at the envelope for long minutes before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. "I don't want to be a chapter in your story. I want to be someone who fits in your silence, your soil, your heart. But I don't know if I'm allowed to. When you're ready to hear the truth, all of it, I'll be at the place where the wheat meets the sky." Elias read the note 3 times, trying to decipher its meaning. The first part was clear enough, her feelings, her doubts. But the last line, "where the wheat meets the sky," that could be anywhere on his vast property. Then it hit him. The East Hill, where they had watched the sunrise together, where he had first opened up to her about his mother. Without a second thought, he started the truck and drove toward his farm, pushing the speed limit the whole way. The velvet box still sat in his pocket, a constant reminder of what might have been, of what might still be, if he could only understand what was happening. The drive seemed endless, though it was only 15 minutes. When he finally turned onto the dirt road leading to his property, his heart was pounding in his chest. Part of him feared she wouldn't be there, that he had misunderstood her message. Another part feared she would be, and that what she had to tell him would destroy everything between them. He parked at the base of the hill and climbed the rest of the way on foot. As he crested the rise, he saw her, standing at the very edge, looking out over the fields that stretched to the horizon. Her hair blew loose in the morning breeze, and she hugged herself as if cold, despite the warm day. "Lena," he called. Me turned, and even from a distance he could see she had been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "You came," she said simply. "Of course I came," he replied, moving closer but still keeping some distance between them. "You left without saying goodbye." "I didn't know how to face you," she admitted, "after what happened in town, after you found out about Marcus. So it's true," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "You know him?" Lena nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, Marcus is my cousin. We grew up together in Riverdale." "And you never thought to mention this?" Elias asked, unable to keep the hurt from his voice. "In all our conversations, all our time together, it never came up that you're related to the man who betrayed me and stole from me." "I wanted to tell you," Lena said, her voice breaking, "so many times. But I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" he demanded. "Afraid that you would look at me exactly the way you're looking at me now," she replied, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Like I'm somehow part of what he did to you. Like I can't be trusted." Elias ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "What am I supposed to think, Lena? You show up in my town, get close to me, all while hiding the fact that you're related to the person who hurt me the most. How does that look?" "I know how it looks," she acknowledged, "but it's not what happened. I didn't come here because of you." "Then why did you come?" he asked, needing to hear it. Lena turned away, looking out over the fields again. "After my aunt died, I had nowhere to go. Marcus, he suggested Cedar County, said there was a good job at the bakery, that the town was nice, that I could start over there. So he did send you here," Elias said, his suspicions seemingly confirmed. "No," Lena corrected, turning back to face him. "He suggested it. I made the choice. I didn't even know about you and him until after I arrived." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Baker mentioned you my first week at work," Lena explained. "Said you were the biggest landowner in the county. That's when I made the connection, that you were the same Elias that Marcus had talked about. And you didn't think that was important information to share when we met?" Elias asked, his voice rising. "What was I supposed to say?" Lena shot back, her own voice strengthening. "Hi, nice to meet you, by the way. My cousin is the guy who stole your money. I was new in town, trying to build a life for myself. I didn't want to be defined by what Marcus did." "So you just pretended not to know?" "Anything about me," Elias said flatly. "I didn't know anything about you," Lena insisted. "Not really. Marcus never talked about you much, just that you had been partners and that it ended badly. He never admitted to stealing from you, Elias. He said there was a misunderstanding, that's all." Elias laughed bitterly. "A misunderstanding? He took $50,000 and disappeared. That's a pretty big misunderstanding." Lena's eyes widened. "50,000? I had no idea it was that much." "Well, now you know," Elias said, shoving his hands into his pockets. His fingers brushed against the velvet box, and a fresh wave of pain washed over him. How quickly things had changed. They stood in silence for a long moment, the breeze rustling through the tall grass around them. Finally, Lena spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "When I first met you at the market, I recognized your name, but not your face. I had no plan, no agenda. I just thought you seemed lonely, like me." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Everything that happened between us after that was real, Elias. Every moment, every conversation, every feeling. I never lied about any of that." Elias wanted to believe her. More than anything, he wanted to trust that what they had built together was genuine. but the doubt that Rebecca had planted had taken root, growing in the fertile soil of his past. Betrayals. "Where is Marcus now?" he asked, changing direction. Lena hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know exactly. The last I heard, he was in Seattle. We don't talk much anymore, not since I found out that he hadn't been honest with me either." "What do you mean?" "After I realized you were the Elias he had talked about, I called him," Lena explained. "I wanted to know his side of the story. He gave me some vague explanation about a business disagreement, but he was evasive, nervous. That's when I started to suspect he wasn't telling me the truth." "And that was when?" Elias asked, trying to piece the timeline together. "About a month after I started working at the bakery," Lena replied. "Before you and I ever really talked." Elias did the math in his head. That would have been 5 months ago, long before they had started seeing each other. "So all this time, you've known who I was, suspected your cousin had wronged me and still said nothing?" he asked, still struggling to understand. "I was afraid," Lena admitted, her voice small. "Afraid of losing you before I even had you. And then, as we got closer, it got harder to find the right moment to tell you. How do you bring something like that up without ruining everything?" "Well, you managed to ruin it anyway," Elias said, immediately regretting the harshness of his words when he saw the pain flash across her face. "I deserve that," she said quietly. "I should have told you sooner. I see that now." Another silence fell between them, heavier than before. Elias looked out over his fields, trying to sort through his tangled emotions. He felt betrayed, yes, but also confused. If Lena had been working with Marcus, why would she admit to knowing him now? Why not continue the deception? "The woman at the cafe," Lena said suddenly. "Who is she?" Elias turned back to her. "Rebecca. We dated before my parents died. She left town after their funeral, said she couldn't handle my grief. And now she's back," Lena observed, "with photos of me and Marcus. That's convenient timing." Something in her tone made Elias pause. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone went to a lot of trouble to find those old photos and give them to her," Lena pointed out. "Someone who knew about me and Marcus and who wanted to drive a wedge between us." The thought hadn't occurred to Elias. He had been so focused on Lena's deception that he hadn't questioned Rebecca's motives. "You think Rebecca is involved in this somehow?" he asked skeptically. "I don't know," Lena said honestly. "But it seems strange that she would return after all these years, right when you and I were getting serious, with evidence that could break us apart." "Maybe," Elias conceded. "But that doesn't change the fact that you kept the truth from me." "No, it doesn't," Lena agreed. "And I'm sorry for that, Elias. More sorry than you can know." She took a step toward him, then stopped, uncertain. "I understand. If you can't forgive me. If you want me to leave Cedar County for good, I will. But I need you to know that everything I feel for you is real. I've never cared about your money or your land. I fell in love with the man who walks his fields at sunset, who listens to the wind in the wheat, who shared his mother's garden with me." The words "fell in love" hung in the air between them. Elias looked at her, really looked at her. Her simple dress, her bare feet in the grass, her eyes honest and afraid and hopeful all at once. If this was an act, it was the most convincing one he had ever seen. "I need time," he said finally, "to think about all this, to figure out what's true and what isn't." Lena nodded, blinking back fresh tears. "I understand. For what it's worth, I won't lie to you again, no matter what it costs me." She started to walk past him, heading down the hill. As she moved by, he caught the scent of her, flower and lavender and something uniquely Lena. His hand moved of its own accord, catching her wrist. "Wait," he said. She stopped, not looking at him. "Where will you go?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she replied. "I packed my things from the apartment, but I haven't decided where to go next." "Don't," Elias said, surprising himself. "Don't leave town, not yet." Lena turned to face him, confusion in her eyes. "But where would I stay?" "The guest house," he said, the solution coming to him as he spoke. "On the north side of the property. It's been empty since my father's foreman retired last year. You can stay there while we figure this out." "Elias, I can't accept that," Lena protested. "Please," he said. not entirely sure why it mattered so much that she stay. It's not charity, it's just, I need to know you're not running away while I sort through all this. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, just until we figure things out. I'll have Martha bring you some groceries, he added. The place is furnished, but there's probably not much in the kitchen. Thank you, Lena said simply. They walked down the hill in silence, the morning sun now high in the sky. At the bottom, Elias's truck waited, and beyond it, the dirt road that led back to the main house. I need to go into town to get my bags, Lena said. They're still at the bakery. I'll drive you, Elias offered. The ride into town was quiet, neither of them knowing quite what to say after the emotional confrontation on the hill. When they reached the bakery, Lena went inside while Elias waited in the truck, his thoughts still swirling. If what Lena said was true, that she had come to Cedar County on Marcus's suggestion, but without any scheme to get close to Elias, then why had Rebecca returned now with those photographs? What was her angle? And more importantly, could he trust his heart to believe in Lena even after this deception? Lena returned a few minutes later with a small suitcase and a canvas bag. Mr. Baker followed her out, giving Elias a long, measured look before helping Lena put her things in the back of the truck. You take care of yourself, girl, he said, patting her arm. The job will be waiting when you're ready to come back. Thank you, Mr. Baker, Lena replied with a grateful smile. For everything. As they drove back to the farm, the silence felt less strained. Elias glanced at Lena, noting the way she looked out the window at the passing fields, her expression peaceful despite everything that had happened. Do you really love it here? He asked suddenly. The land, I mean. She turned to him, surprised by the question. Yes, she answered without hesitation. From the first moment I saw it. There's something healing about all this open space, about being able to see the horizon in every direction. It was exactly how he felt about the farm, a feeling he had never been able to put into words until now. The realization shook him. How could she understand him so well if everything between them was a lie? They arrived at the guest house, a small but well-maintained cottage set back from the main road. Elias helped Lena carry her things inside, showing her where everything was. The kitchen, the bathroom, the linen closet with fresh towels and sheets. It's lovely, she said, running a hand over the simple wooden table in the kitchen. Thank you for this, Elias. You didn't have to offer me a place to stay. I know, he replied. He stood awkwardly by the door, not sure what else to say. Finally, he added, I'll have Martha bring those groceries by this afternoon, and I'll stop by tomorrow. We can talk more then. Lena nodded. I'll be here. As Elias drove back to the main house, his emotions were still in turmoil. But one thing had become clear. He wasn't ready to give up on Lena yet, not without being absolutely certain of the truth. That evening, instead of walking his fields, alone as usual, Elias made a phone call. It was time to find out exactly what Rebecca was up to. The next morning, Elias drove into town early, parking outside the small hotel where Rebecca was staying. He had called ahead, asking to meet her for breakfast. She had agreed immediately, her voice smug as if she had expected this. She was waiting in the hotel restaurant when he arrived, dressed impeccably as always, her red lipstick a stark contrast to her pale skin. Elias, she greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was hoping you'd call. Cut the act, Rebecca, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. I want to know what your game is. Why are you really back in Cedar County? Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. No small talk? Fine. I'm here because I heard you were getting serious with someone, and I was concerned. Concerned, Elias repeated. Flatly. After 5 years of no contact, you suddenly care about my love life. We have history, Elias, she replied, reaching for his hand across the table. He pulled back before she could touch him. History that you ended when you walked out after my parents died. Try again. Rebecca's expression hardened. Fine. The truth is, I made a mistake leaving back then. I've regretted it ever since. When I heard you were finally moving on, I thought maybe there was still a chance for us. So you found out Lena is Marcus's cousin and used it to try to break us up, Elias said, the pieces falling into place. How did you even know about that connection? A flicker of something, unease perhaps, crossed Rebecca's face. I have my sources, Marcus, Elias guessed, watching her carefully. You're in touch with Marcus. The slight widening of her eyes confirmed his suspicion. That's ridiculous, she said, a beat too late. Is it? Elias pressed. Because it seems like an awfully big coincidence that you would show up now with those photographs, knowing exactly who Lena is and how to hurt us. Us? Rebecca repeated, her voice cool. So you're still a couple despite what I told you? That's none of your business, Elias replied. What I want to know is why you're working with Marcus. What's in it for you? Rebecca laughed, a brittle sound. You always were smart, Elias, too smart for your own good sometimes. She leaned forward, dropping the pretense. Fine. Yes, I'm in touch with Marcus. He reached out to me a few months ago, said his cousin had moved to Cedar County and gotten close to you. He was worried. Worried about what? Elias asked, though he was beginning to see the picture. About you finding out the truth about what happened 5 years ago, Rebecca said, about where the money really went. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. What are you talking about? Rebecca smiled, a predatory curve of her lips. Marcus didn't steal that money, Elias. I did. The confession hit Elias like a physical blow. You? But how? Why? The how was easy, Rebecca explained, examining her perfectly manicured nails. I had access to all your accounts back then. Remember? You trusted me completely. The why? Well, let's just say I had debts that needed paying, and you had more money than you knew what to do with. So you stole from me and let Marcus take the blame, Elias said, his voice hollow with shock. He knew, Rebecca admitted. But he agreed to disappear to be the fall guy, for a price, of course, a small share of the money. And now, Elias asked, struggling to process this revelation. Why come back and risk exposing yourself? Because Marcus got nervous when Lena moved here, Rebecca explained. He was afraid she'd find out the truth somehow, tell you everything. He didn't. To know she'd fall for you, that it would become complicated. So you came to drive a wedge between us, Elias concluded, to make sure I wouldn't trust her if she did learn the truth, and to see if there was anything worth salvaging between us, Rebecca added with a smile that turned his stomach. We were good together once, Elias. We could be again. Elias stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his untouched coffee. We're done here, Rebecca, and if you know what's good for you, you'll be gone from Cedar County by sunset. Are you threatening? Me? She asked, her smile fading. I'm promising you, Elias replied, his voice low and steady. I have enough evidence now to go to the sheriff about the stolen money. Unless you want to face those charges, I suggest you leave. Today. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Rebecca's face. You're bluffing. You don't have any evidence. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He pressed play. On a recording, and Rebecca's voice filled the air between them. Marcus didn't steal that money, Elias, I did. Her face went pale as she realized she had been recorded. You can't. I can, Elias cut her off. And I will, unless you're gone. By nightfall, and Rebecca, don't ever come back. Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked out of the restaurant, his heart pounding but his mind clearer than it had been in days. He drove straight to the guest house, not bothering to call ahead. Lena answered the door on the first. Knock, surprise registering on her face when she saw him. Elias, she said, I wasn't expecting you so early. I need to tell you something, he said, stepping inside when she moved back to allow him entry. About Rebecca, about Marcus, about everything. They sat at the kitchen table as Elias recounted his conversation with Rebecca, watching Lena's expression change from confusion to shock to anger as the truth unfolded. She stole the money and let Marcus take the blame, Lena repeated, disbelief in her voice, and he agreed to it. For a price, Elias confirmed, which explains how he had the money to start over somewhere else. I can't believe he would do that, Lena said, shaking her head. Let someone else take the blame for his actions. He didn't exactly take the blame, Elias pointed out. I just disappeared. Let everyone assume the worst. Including me, Lena added softly. He let me believe there had been some kind of misunderstanding between you two. All these years, he knew exactly what had happened. They sat in silence. For a moment, both processing the implications of these revelations. "I'm sorry," Elias said finally, "for doubting you, for believing, even for a moment, that you might be part of some scheme." Lena looked up at him, her eyes gentle. "You had every reason to doubt me, Elias. I wasn't honest with you about knowing Marcus. That's on me. But your feelings for me, they were real," Elias asked, needing to hear it again. "Every moment," Lena confirmed, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Everything between us has been real from the start. I never had any agenda other than falling in love with you." Elias tightened his grip on her hand, his heart lighter than it had been in days. "I believe you," he said simply. Outside, the morning sun shone bright over the fields, promising a beautiful day. Ahead, a world of possibilities stretched before them. No more secrets, no more doubts, just the truth and whatever they chose to build on it. Elias reached into his pocket and felt the velvet box that had been waiting there for what seemed like an eternity. It wasn't the right moment, not yet, but soon, when they had healed from this, when they were ready to move forward together. For now, it was enough to know that the quiet in his heart had been replaced by something warmer, stronger, and infinitely more precious love. And as Lena smiled at him across the table, her hand firm in his, Elias knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of their story. What neither of them realized, as they sat together in the sunlit kitchen, was that someone was watching the guest house from a distance. A figure in a car parked on the county road, binoculars raised to their eyes. Rebecca might be leaving town, but she wasn't going quietly, and she wasn't going alone. The next morning dawned clear and bright over Cedar County. Elias woke early, as was his habit, but instead of his usual sense of solitude, he felt a lightness in his chest. Lena had forgiven him for doubting her. They had a chance to start fresh without secrets between them. After a quick breakfast, he walked out to check on the fields with Tom. The harvest was coming in well, better than expected, given the dry summer they'd had. "You seem different today," Tom commented as they inspected the south field. "Something good happen?" Elias couldn't help the smile that crossed his face. "You could say that," Tom nodded knowingly. "Glad to hear it. The whole crew's been wondering if you and that Baker girl would work things out." "Her name is Lena," Elias corrected gently. "And yes, we're working things out." "Good," Tom replied simply. "She seems like a keeper." By midday, Elias had finished his most pressing work and found himself drawn to the guest house. He hadn't planned to visit Lena until evening, but he couldn't wait. He wanted to see her, to continue rebuilding what they had almost lost. As he approached the cottage, he noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar, which was unlike Lena. She was always careful about locking up, a habit from her years of living alone. "Lena," he called, pushing the door open wider. "Are you here?" The cottage was silent. He stepped inside, a sense of unease growing as he took in the scene. The kitchen was untidy, a cup of coffee half finished on the table, a chair tipped over, as if someone had stood up in a hurry. "Lena," he called again, moving quickly through the small living room toward the bedroom. The bedroom door was open, revealing a scene of disarray. Dresser drawers pulled out, clothes strewn across the bed. Lena's small suitcase open but only partially packed. Fear gripped Elias's heart. This wasn't right. Lena was neat, organized. She would never leave a place like this unless... His phone rang, startling him. He pulled it from his pocket, hoping it was Lena. The screen showed an unknown number. "Hello?" He answered quickly. "Hello, Elias," came a familiar voice. "Rebecca. Looking for someone." Ice settled in his veins. "What have you done, Rebecca?" "Nothing yet," she replied smoothly. "But I think we need to have a conversation. A real one this time, without your little recording device." "Where is Lena?" Elias demanded, his voice hard. "Safe," Rebecca assured him. "For now, she's actually quite sweet, your Baker girl. Kept insisting there was some misunderstanding." "If you hurt her..." Now, Rebecca cut him off. "No need for threats. As long as you do exactly as I say, she'll be just fine." Elias gripped the phone tighter, forcing himself to remain calm. "What do you want?" "Smart boy," Rebecca purred, always cutting to the chase. "What I want is simple. Money. $50,000, the same amount I took 5 years ago. Call it interest on our arrangement." "You're blackmailing me," Elias stated flatly. "I prefer to think of it as renegotiating terms," Rebecca replied. "You have until midnight to get the money together. Cash, of course. I'll text you the drop location." "How do I know Lena is okay?" Elias asked, his mind racing. "Put her on the phone." There was a pause, then rustling sounds. "Elias?" Lena's voice came through, shaky, but strong. "Don't do what she—" Her voice cut off abruptly. "Satisfied?" Rebecca asked back on the line. "Midnight, Elias. Come alone, bring the cash, or your girlfriend will regret it." The call ended, leaving Elias standing in the silent cottage, rage and fear battling inside him. His first instinct was to call the sheriff, but what if Rebecca was watching? What if she hurt Lena at the first sign of police involvement? He needed help, but he needed to be careful. Looking around the cottage once more for any clue to where Rebecca might have taken Lena, his eye caught on something unusual. On the kitchen table, next to the half-finished coffee, was a folded piece of paper with his name on it. He picked it up, recognizing Lena's handwriting instantly. Inside was a hastily scrawled message. "Rebecca came with a man. Said Marcus wants to talk. Something feels wrong. If I'm not back by noon, the man had a cap with Silver Lake Lodge on it." Silver Lake Lodge. Elias knew it well. A rundown fishing camp about 20 miles north of town, mostly abandoned since the new highway redirected traffic away from the lake. The perfect place to hold someone without being discovered. He checked his watch. It was just past 1 o'clock. Lena had been gone for at least an hour, maybe more. He couldn't wait until midnight, couldn't risk Rebecca getting impatient or changing her mind, but he also couldn't go in blindly. Rebecca had mentioned a man, probably hired muscle to help with the kidnapping. There might be others. And if Marcus was involved, as Lena's note suggested, the situation was even more complicated. Elias made a decision. He would get the money. That part was easy enough. But he wouldn't be going to Silver Lake Lodge alone. An hour later, Elias sat in his truck, outside Tom's modest house on the edge of his property. He had already been to the bank, withdrawn the $50,000 in cash, and now he needed to put the rest of his plan in motion. Tom opened the door before Elias could even knock. "Mr. Rowe? Everything okay?" "No," Elias replied honestly. "I need your help, Tom, and I need you to keep this between us." Inside, Elias laid out the situation as concisely as possible. Tom listened without interruption, his weathered face growing increasingly grim. "So this woman has kidnapped Lena and is demanding ransom," Tom summarized when Elias finished. "And you think they're holding her at Silver Lake Lodge?" "Yes," Elias confirmed. "I have the money, but I can't go alone. Rebecca said midnight, but I don't trust her to wait that long. We need to get there sooner." "What's your plan?" Tom asked, already moving to a cabinet where he kept his hunting rifle. "We go in quiet," Elias explained. "The lodge has several cabins spread around the lake. We'll need to figure out which one they're using without being spotted." Tom nodded, checking his rifle before carefully placing it in a canvas case. "I've got a friend who used to work security, ex-military. He can help, and he knows how to be discreet." "Call him," Elias said, relief washing over him at Tom's immediate support. "The more help we have, the better." By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Elias, Tom, and Tom's friend Mike, a solid, quiet man with watchful eyes, were parked on a service road half a mile from Silver Lake Lodge. Mike had brought binoculars and was scanning the property methodically. 3 vehicles, he reported. 1 parked by the main lodge building, 2 more near the cabin farthest from the lake. That's probably where they're keeping her. "Any sign of guards?" Elias asked. "1 man on the porch of the cabin," Mike confirmed. "Smoking, wearing a baseball cap. The man from Lena's note," Elias thought. "How do we get past him?" "We wait," Mike said simply. "Watch their patterns. Everyone makes mistakes, gets distracted. When night falls, it'll be easier to move in without being seen. The wait was excruciating for Elias. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour an eternity. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lake, Mike continued his surveillance. "Movement," he said suddenly. "Two people coming out of the cabin, a woman and a man." Elias took the binoculars, focusing quickly. The woman was unmistakably Rebecca, her sleek figure unmistakable even at this distance. The man beside her was taller, with dark hair and a confident stance that Elias would recognize anywhere. "Marcus," he growled. "So he is involved." They watched as Rebecca and Marcus walked to the main lodge building, disappearing inside. The guard on the porch remained, now joined by a second man who had emerged from somewhere behind the cabin. To two guards now, Mike noted, but Rebecca and Marcus are away from the cabin. This might be our best chance. "What's the play?" Tom asked, looking to Mike. "We circle around through the woods," Mike explained, pointing to a dense stretch of trees that ran along the lakeshore. "Come up behind the cabin. There's likely a back door or window we can use. The guards are focused on the front." "And then?" Elias pressed. "Then we improvise," Mike said with a grim smile. "But first we need to get a closer look. Confirm Lena is in there and what condition she's in." The three men moved silently through the trees as darkness settled over the lake. Years of hunting had made Tom and Mike adept at moving without sound, and Elias followed their lead carefully. The chorus of frogs and insects around the lake helped mask their approach. They reached the edge of the clearing where the cabin stood, keeping to the shadows of the trees. From this vantage point, they could see the two guards clearly, one still on the porch, the other pacing around the side of the cabin. Mike studied the cabin intently. "Second window from the left," he whispered. "The shade is drawn, but there's a gap. I can see movement inside." Elias strained his eyes, finally catching what Mike had spotted, a shadow moving behind the thin curtain, pacing back and forth in what appeared to be a small room. "Could be Lena," Tom suggested. "Only one way to find out," Mike replied. "We need a distraction for those guards, something to draw them away from the cabin, even briefly." Tom thought for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bottle. "Deer scent," he explained, "for hunting. Strong smell that'll draw any dogs they might have and confuse the hell out of people." "Good thinking," Mike approved. "Pour it about 100 yards that way, then make some noise. Not too much, just enough to get their attention." Tom nodded and disappeared into the trees. Elias and Mike waited, watching the guards carefully. A few minutes later they heard a distant crack of breaking branches, followed by a rustling sound that seemed to move through the underbrush. The effect was immediate. Both guards turned toward the sound, alert. "What was that?" one called to the other. "Probably a deer," the second replied, but he looked uneasy. "Should we check it out?" "You go," the first guard said. "I'll stay here." The second guard pulled out a flashlight and headed toward the trees where the sound had come from. One down, one to go. Just then, a powerful, musky odor wafted through the clearing, Tom's deer scent doing its job. The remaining guard wrinkled his nose in disgust. "What the hell is that smell?" he muttered, stepping off the porch to investigate. "Now," Mike whispered, moving swiftly toward the back of the cabin with Elias close behind. They reached the rear wall without being spotted. A small window near the ground level appeared to open into a basement or storage area. Mike tested it gently, finding it unlocked. He slid it open silently and peered inside. "Clear," he whispered. "Tight fit, but we can make it." Mike went first, sliding through the narrow opening with surprising agility for his size. Elias followed, dropping quietly onto a dirt floor in what appeared to be an unfinished storage space beneath the cabin. Single bare bulb provided dim illumination. Wooden stairs led up to a door, presumably opening into the main floor of the cabin. They moved silently to the stairs, Mike leading the way. At the top, Mike pressed his ear to the door, listening intently before nodding to Elias. Slowly, carefully, he turned the knob and pushed the door open a crack. The main room of the cabin was empty. A simple space with a worn couch, a table scattered with playing cards and several empty beer bottles. A hallway led off to what appeared to be bedrooms. They stepped cautiously into the room, freezing when a floorboard creaked under Elias's foot. But no alarm was raised. The guards were still outside, investigating the mysterious sounds and smells. In the woods. Which room? Elias mouthed silently to Mike. Mike pointed to a door at the end of the hallway, the one that would correspond to the window with the moving shadow they had seen from outside. Elias moved toward it, heart pounding in his chest. He tried the door, finding it locked from the outside. A good sign. This was likely where they were keeping Lena. He slid the bolt quietly and opened the door, bracing himself for what he might find. Lena sat on a small bed, her hands tied in front of her but otherwise appearing unharmed. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw him. "Elias," she whispered in disbelief. He rushed to her side, quickly working to untie the ropes around her wrists. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "No," she assured him, wincing as circulation returned to her hands. "Just scared. How did you find me?" "Your note," Elias explained, helping her to her feet. "Smart thinking with the cap." "We need to move," Mike interrupted from the doorway. "The guards won't stay distracted for long." Elias led Lena into the main room where Mike was peering out the front window. "Guards are still searching the woods," he reported, "but Rebecca and Marcus are coming back from the main lodge." "The basement," Elias suggested. "The way we came in." They hurried back to the door leading to the storage area, helping Lena down the steep stairs. They had just reached the window when they heard the cabin door open above them, followed by Rebecca's voice. "Check on the girl. It's almost time to call Elias with the new drop location." Footsteps crossed the floor overhead, followed by a shout. "She's gone. The door's open." "Find her," Marcus's voice now, sharp with anger. "She can't have gotten far." Mike boosted Lena through the window, then helped Elias follow. He came through last, pulling the window closed behind him, just as the storage room door crashed open above. "Stay low," Mike whispered as they crouched in the shadows beside the cabin. "We need to get to the trees." They edged along the wall of the cabin, freezing whenever a beam from a flashlight swept near them. The commotion inside the cabin had brought the guards running back, and now the entire area was alive with activity. "There!" a voice shouted suddenly. "By the corner!" A flashlight beam caught them, illuminating Lena's pale face. Without hesitation, Mike shoved Elias and Lena toward the trees. "Run!" he ordered. "I'll hold them off." Elias pulled Lena along as they sprinted for the tree line, the sounds of pursuit close behind them. A shot rang out, then another. Mike returning fire, Elias realized, providing covering fire to aid their escape. They reached the trees, plunging into the darkness of the forest. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire echoed across the clearing. Elias led Lena along the path they had used earlier, hoping to circle back to where Tom should be waiting. "This way," he whispered, guiding her through the underbrush. "Tom's creating a diversion on the other side of the property. If we can reach him, we can get to the truck." They moved as quickly as they dared through the darkness, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant as their pursuers spread out to search. Elias kept a firm grip on Lena's hand, determined not to lose her again. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached the spot where they had left Tom. He was nowhere to be seen. "Tom?" Elias called softly, afraid to raise his voice too much. A rustle in the bushes made them both tense, but it was Tom who emerged, rifle at the ready. "Mr. Rowe," he said with relief. "You found her. We need to get to the truck," Elias explained quickly. "Mike is providing cover, but they're searching the woods." Tom nodded. "This way, I've cleared a path." He led them through the trees, taking a route that avoided the main trails. They could hear distant shouts, and occasionally the beam of a flashlight would penetrate the canopy above them, but they remained undetected. They had almost reached the service road where they had parked when a figure stepped out of the shadows in front of them. Elias pushed Lena behind him protectively, but Tom already had his rifle raised. "Easy," came Mike's voice as he stepped into a patch of moonlight. "It's just me." "You made it," Elias said with relief. "Barely," Mike grimaced, and Elias noticed. He was holding his left arm, a dark stain spreading on his sleeve. "Caught a bullet, but it's just a graze. We need to move. They're not far behind me." They hurried to the truck, helping Mike into the back seat while Lena climbed in beside Elias. Tom started the engine, keeping the headlights off as they pulled away from the service road and onto a backcountry lane that would take them away from Silver Lake. "What about Rebecca and Marcus?" Lena asked, her voice still shaky. "Won't they come after us?" "Let them try," Tom said grimly, patting his rifle. "They won't," Elias said with certainty. "Not after tonight. Rebecca's smart enough to know when she's beaten. And Marcus, well, he's always been a coward at heart." He squeezed Lena's hand reassuringly. She leaned against his shoulder, the adrenaline of their escape beginning to wear off. "I can't believe you came for me," she said softly. "You could have been killed." "Did you think I wouldn't?" Elias asked, surprised. "After everything that happened, the lies, the misunderstandings, none of that matters," Elias said firmly. "What matters is that I love you, Lena. I think I have since the first time I saw you at the market." Lena looked up at him, her eyes shining in the darkness of the truck cab. "I love you too," she whispered. "I was so afraid I'd never get to tell you that." From the back seat, Mike cleared his throat. "Not to interrupt the moment, but what happens? Now those two aren't just going to disappear." Elias nodded, his expression hardening. "I know, which is why our first stop is the sheriff's office." "But we have no proof," Lena pointed out. "It'll be our word against theirs." "We have this," Elias replied, pulling out his phone. "I recorded my conversation with Rebecca this morning, where she admitted to the original theft. And now we have kidnapping to add to the charges. Plus 3 witnesses," Tom added. "That counts for something in Cedar County." They drove in silence for a while, the adrenaline of the escape gradually giving way to a quiet sense of relief. Elias kept his arm around Lena, as if afraid she might disappear if he let go. As they approached the town, lights twinkling in the distance, Lena spoke again. "What about the garden? Your mother's garden?" Elias looked at her, surprised by the question. "What about it?" "I was going to plant lavender tomorrow," she explained. "Before everything happened, I found some starts at the garden center that looked just like the ones in the old photographs you showed me." The simple domestic concern after everything they had just been through struck Elias as both absurd and perfectly right. He laughed, a genuine laugh that released some of the tension he had been carrying. "We'll plant them the day after tomorrow," he promised. Together. At the sheriff's office, their story was met with initial skepticism that quickly gave way to action as Mike's injury provided tangible evidence of their claims. The sheriff dispatched deputies to Silver Lake Lodge immediately, while a paramedic tended to Mike's wound. "We'll need formal statements from all of you," the sheriff explained. "And if we catch them at the lodge, there'll be charges filed right away. If not, well, we'll put out an alert. They won't get far." Elias nodded, sitting beside Lena as she gave her account of the kidnapping. He marveled at her composure, her clarity even after such an ordeal. She was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, including perhaps himself. By dawn, word had come back from the deputies at Silver Lake. The cabin was empty, but they had found evidence supporting their story: the ropes that had bound Lena, shell casings from the gunfire exchange, and most damning of all, a notebook in Rebecca's handwriting detailing plans for the ransom demand. Rebecca and Marcus had fled, but their descriptions and vehicle information had been circulated to law enforcement across the state. It was only a matter of time before they were caught. The sheriff insisted on sending Lena to the hospital for a checkup, despite her protests that she was fine. Elias rode with her in the ambulance, refusing to leave her side. "You know," she said as they waited for the doctor, "all I could think about while they had me tied up in that cabin was your fields, the way the wheat moves in the wind, how peaceful it is at sunset." Elias took her hand, running his thumb over the marks the ropes had left on her wrist. "It's more peaceful when you're there to share it." The doctor pronounced Lena healthy aside from minor bruising and dehydration, releasing her with instructions to rest and drink plenty of fluids. By mid-morning, they were back at Elias's farmhouse, with Martha fussing over them both and insisting on making a huge breakfast despite their protests that they weren't hungry. "You'll eat," she declared firmly. "Both of you. After what you've been through, you need your strength." Too tired to argue, they sat at the kitchen table while Martha piled their plates with eggs, bacon, and her famous biscuits. The familiar ritual of breakfast in the farmhouse kitchen felt surreal after the events of the night before, yet at the same time, It was exactly what they needed. A return to normalcy. After eating, Lena's exhaustion finally caught up with her. Elisha showed her to the guest room, where Martha had already turned down the bed and left fresh towels. "Get some rest," he told her, kissing her forehead gently. "I'll be right down the hall if you need anything." "Stay," she said, catching his hand as he turned to leave. "Just until I fall asleep. I don't want to be alone just yet." Elias sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hand as she drifted off. Her face in sleep was peaceful, the worry lines of the past 24 hours smoothed away. He marveled at how quickly she had become essential to his life, how empty his home had felt without her in it. When he was sure she was deeply asleep, he slipped out of the room and went downstairs, where Martha was cleaning up the breakfast. "Dishes. That girl's been through a lot," she commented as Elias entered the kitchen, "but she's got spirit." "Yes, she does," Elias agreed, a smile touching his lips. "She reminds me of your mother," Martha continued, her hands busy with the dishes, but her eyes watching Elias carefully. "The same kind of quiet strength." The comparison startled Elias, but as he thought about it, he realized Martha was right. Lena did have the same gentle determination that had characterized his mother, the ability to face challenges without losing her essential kindness. "I'm going to ask her to marry me," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the declaration. Martha smiled, not looking up from her work. "About time," she said simply. Later that day, after checking in with the sheriff, no sign of Rebecca or Marcus yet, but the search was continuing, Elias walked his fields alone. The wheat was golden and ready for harvest, swaying in the afternoon, breeze just as it had every autumn for generations. But for the first time in years, Elias didn't feel alone among the stalks. Even walking by himself, he carried Lena with him, her smile, her strength, her love for the land that matched his own. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he made his way back to the house. To his surprise, Lena was waiting for him on the porch, wrapped in a quilt against the evening chill. "Should you be up?" he asked, concerned. "The doctor said you needed rest." "I've rested enough," she replied, making room for him beside her on the porch swing. "Besides, I didn't want to miss this." "Miss what?" "The sunset," she explained. "Over your fields, our fields, if you'll share them with me." Elias sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "I want to share everything with you, Lena. Not just the fields or the house, but all of it. My life, my future, my heart." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box that had been waiting there for what seemed like a lifetime. Opening it, he revealed a simple but elegant ring with a small diamond that caught the last rays of the setting sun. "I've been carrying this around for days," he admitted, "waiting for the right moment. After everything that's happened, I realize there is no perfect moment. There's just now and us and the life we could build together." Lena's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to his face. "Elias, marry me," he said simply. "Be my wife, my partner, my heart's quiet." "Place?" "Yes," she whispered, her face radiant with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the last edge of the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deepening shades of purple and blue. The first stars appeared, twinkling above the wheat fields that stretched to the horizon. "It's beautiful," Lena murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. "It is," Elias agreed, but he wasn't looking at the sunset. He was looking at her, the woman who had brought light back into his life, who had filled the empty spaces in his heart with love and laughter, and the promise of a future together. The weeks that followed, life at the Rowe farm settled into a new rhythm. The harvest came in better than expected. Rebecca and Marcus were finally apprehended trying to cross the state line, and Lena moved into the farmhouse permanently, her few belongings finding their places among Elias's as if they had always belonged. There, they planted lavender in his mother's garden, worked side by side to restore the old flower beds, and planned a spring wedding that would take place right there, among the blooms they had nurtured together. In the evenings, they still walked, the fields at sunset hand in hand, listening to the wind move through the wheat. But now, instead of wondering if this was all his life would ever be, Elias looked forward to all the years stretching ahead of them, years of quiet mornings and gentle nights, of shared work and shared dreams, of a love that had found its home in the wide open spaces of Cedar County. And sometimes, when the light was just right and the wind whispered through the wheat, Elias could almost hear his mother's voice in the rustle of the stalks, approving of the woman who had brought her garden back to life and her son back to joy. For in the end, what Elias had sought all those lonely years wasn't just someone to share the quiet with, but someone who understood that the deepest love often speaks not in grand gestures or elaborate words, but in the peaceful silence of two hearts that have finally found their way home to each other. And in Lena's eyes, in her smile, in the warmth of her hand in his, Elias had found exactly that, a quiet heart that beat in perfect rhythm with his own. The end.